Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everyday English Podcast with Olivia. Today, I want to talk about something quiet, something that doesn't always cause big fights, but slowly shapes our relationships, our opinions, and the way we look at the world. This episode was inspired by a paragraph from Martin Eden by Jack London. I won't read the paragraph directly. Instead, I want to talk about the idea behind it and how it shows up in everyday life. Before we get there, I want to start with something very close to us: men and women. Men and women often say they don't understand each other. You hear it everywhere. In families, in friendships, in relationships that once felt easy and later became complicated. People say things like, "He never talks about his feelings. She thinks too much. He doesn't listen. She expects too much." At first, these sentences sound harmless, almost normal. But if you listen carefully, there is something deeper behind them. Very often, they are not about behavior. They are about beliefs. Beliefs about how a man should act. Beliefs about how a woman should think. Beliefs about what is normal and what is not. Most people don't wake up one day and decide to believe these things. They grow up with them. They hear them at home. They see them in movies. They repeat them without questioning. Over time, these ideas become familiar. And what feels familiar often feels right. The problem begins when familiarity turns into certainty. When someone stops saying, "This is how I see it," and starts saying, "This is how it is." That small change makes a big difference. In relationships, this often shows up quietly. One person believes they know better, not in an aggressive way, not with shouting or anger. More like this: "I just want to help. I'm saying this for your own good. Trust me, I know how this works." Sometimes this help really comes from care, but sometimes it comes from the idea that one way of living is more correct than another. And once that idea enters a relationship, balance starts to disappear. Instead of two people learning from each other, one person becomes the guide, and the other becomes the project. One person speaks, the other adjusts. At first, this feels small, almost invisible, but over time, it creates distance. This doesn't only happen between men and women. It happens between parents and children. When parents believe their life choices are the only safe ones. It happens between teachers and students. When teachers stop listening. It happens at work. When one voice always decides, and others slowly stop speaking. And if we look at the bigger picture, it happens between cultures and societies too. Countries believe their system is the best. Groups believe their values are superior. People believe their truth is the truth. They look at others and think, "If only they were more like us." Sometimes this belief comes with kindness, sometimes with power, sometimes with control. But it almost always comes from the same place. The belief that my way is not just a way, but the right way. This is exactly the idea that made me stop while reading Martin Eden. There is a paragraph near the end of the book where Jack London talks about this way of thinking, not in a loud or dramatic way, but calmly, almost patiently. He talks about how, for centuries, people have believed that their beliefs, their religion, their way of organizing life was the best possible version. Because of that belief, they looked at others as less developed, less intelligent, or simply wrong. What struck me was not how old this idea is, but how familiar it still feels. In Martin Eden, this idea appears clearly. in the relationship between Martin and Ruth. Ruth is educated, polite, and well-meaning. She believes in improvement, culture, and discipline. She wants Martin to change. She wants him to read more, speak differently, fit into her world. From her point of view, she is helping him move forward. And maybe she truly believes that. But she never fully questions why her world should be the goal. She never asks whether Martin's world has value on its own. This is where things become uncomfortable. Because Ruth is not cruel. She is not evil. She is not trying to hurt Martin. She is simply convinced that her way of living is better. And that conviction is powerful. It doesn't shout. It doesn't attack. It smiles. It explains. It corrects. And, because it feels polite, it often goes unnoticed. The paragraph that inspired this episode points exactly to this kind of thinking. The kind that believes it knows better. Not because it has listened more, but because it feels more advanced. This thinking existed long before modern times. It existed in religion, in politics, in social systems, and it still exists today. It changes language. It changes symbols. But it keeps the same core idea. When people believe their way is superior, they stop being curious. They stop asking questions. They stop wondering how life looks from the other side. And curiosity is replaced by judgment. If we go back to relationships, we can see this clearly. When one partner truly believes, they are more logical, more realistic, or more mature. Listening becomes difficult. They listen to respond, not to understand. They hear words, but they don't hear meaning. And slowly, the other person feels smaller, not because they are weaker, but because they are no longer seen. This is how distance grows. Not through big arguments, but through quiet assumptions. Today, this kind of thinking feels louder, because we live in a world where everyone has a platform. On social media, opinions travel fast. People choose sides quickly. They defend ideas fiercely. They rarely pause to reflect. Everyone wants to be right. Very few people want to be curious. And when curiosity disappears, conversation turns into conflict. But this problem doesn't belong only to the internet. It exists in daily life, in conversations where people interrupt instead of listening, in moments where someone feels judged for thinking differently, in relationships where one person slowly feels they are always the one adjusting. What makes this difficult is that this way of thinking often feels safe. Believing you are right can be comforting. It creates a clear world with clear answers. It protects you from doubt. But growth doesn't happen in places without doubt. Understanding doesn't grow in spaces where questions are not welcome. When I reflect on the paragraph in Martin Eden, I realize that the most dangerous beliefs are not always aggressive. They are calm, confident, certain. They don't ask, "What can I learn?" They say, "This is how things should be." If we think about men and women again, we see how easily this belief can damage connection. When one side feels superior, equality disappears. And without equality, love turns into guidance, and partnership turns into instruction. True connection needs balance. It needs the courage to say, "I might be wrong." It needs the willingness to listen without planning the next answer. This doesn't mean we should accept everything or agree with every idea. It means something simpler and much harder. It means staying open, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means choosing understanding over being right. Just questions to think about. When you disagree with someone, do you try to understand them, or do you try to correct them? In your relationships, do you listen to connect, or do you listen to convince? Are your beliefs opening doors or closing them? Sometimes real learning doesn't feel exciting. It feels unsettling. It asks us to look at ourselves before we look at others. And that might be the hardest part. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you want to continue this conversation, you can share your thoughts in the comments or check the extra material linked below. Until next time, take care, stay open, and keep learning slowly and honestly.